On July 23, 2010, at 3:45 p.m., Mrs. Chen gave birth to a baby boy at Shenzhen Phoenix Hospital. The couple was overjoyed, but their happiness was short-lived. Around 9 p.m., as the anesthesia wore off, Mrs. Chen began to feel severe pain in her buttocks. At first, they thought it was a normal reaction after childbirth, but the pain intensified, making it impossible for Mrs. Chen to sleep. Her husband, Mr. Chen, lifted the blanket to check and was horrified to see her anus swollen and protruding, surrounded by black stitches. Welcome to Red Eastern True Crime. If you like true crime stories, please subscribe to my channel. Let's dive into this story. As first-time parents, Chen Mo and Lin Liping, Mrs. Chen, were terrified by the situation. Mr. Chen described the protrusion as slightly smaller than an apple, but larger than an egg, surrounded by black threads. Confused and worried, Mr. Chen approached the obstetrician who delivered their baby, only to be told that no stitches would be placed in that area. He then found Ms. Zhang Zhirong, the midwife who had been with his wife since she was admitted to the hospital. We'll call her Nurse Zhang. Nurse Zhang said, "Yes, I sewed her up because I noticed that your wife had hemorrhoids, so I performed a minor operation to save her from needing it later." Mr. Chen asked, "Who permitted you? Why didn't you inform the patient or her family?" Nurse Zhang replied, "Well, it's free. You're welcome." Mr. Chen didn't think much of it and went back to taking care of his wife, but Mrs. Chen remained in pain. Ice packs and painkillers didn't help. Mr. Chen was very worried about his wife. The more he thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. We just came here to have a baby, and his wife never mentioned anything about having hemorrhoids before, he thought. Later, Nurse Zhang explained, "I only tied the hemorrhoid, not the anus." She said that during Mrs. Chen's natural delivery, there was a tear in the perineum, and the obstetrician sewed it up. While the doctor was sewing, Nurse Zhang noticed that Mrs. Chen's hemorrhoid had prolapsed and was bleeding from the strain of childbirth. She tried to stop the bleeding by applying pressure, but it didn't work. By this time, the doctor had left the delivery room, leaving her alone. With over 20 years' experience as a midwife, she instinctively used black silk thread to ligate the hemorrhoid. Ligation involves tying a silk thread around the base of the hemorrhoid to cut off its blood supply, causing it to become ischemic, gradually die, and eventually fall off naturally. Mr. Chen couldn't understand. Even if the hemorrhoids were prolapsed and bleeding, she should have told the family before the operation. Even if it was urgent, she should have informed them afterward. Nurse Zhang didn't do this. Instead, it wasn't until Mrs. Chen was in excruciating pain that Mr. Chen discovered the extra procedure. Mr. Chen lost trust in Phoenix Hospital and sought opinions from several other hospitals. The obstetricians he consulted were shocked, saying they had never heard of a midwife performing hemorrhoid surgery. They explained that treating hemorrhoids immediately after childbirth is risky because it can hinder recovery, increase the likelihood of recurrence, and cause infection. Angered by this information, Mr. Chen believed that no additional surgery should be performed on a new mother until at least 1 month after childbirth. As a midwife, Nurse Zhang was not qualified to perform such surgical procedures. Nurse Zhang claimed that the hemorrhoid ligation involved tying with silk thread, without incisions. But Mr. Chen saw that the thread pierced his wife's skin. It wasn't just tying, it was sewing. She had sewn his wife's anus. The more Mr. Chen thought about it, the angrier he became. He remembered Nurse Zhang's behavior when his wife was first admitted, and concluded that this was a deliberate act of revenge on Nurse Zhang's part. On July 23, 2010, Mr. Chen brought his wife to Shenzhen Phoenix Hospital, a private hospital. They stayed in a deluxe single room at a cost of over 400 RMB per day, about $60. Nurse Zhang conducted a prenatal examination. After the checkup, Nurse Zhang told Mr. Chen, "Get ready." Mr. Chen was confused and asked, "Get ready for what? We are already prepared." 10 minutes later, Nurse Zhang returned and asked again, "Are you ready?" Mr. Chen, still confused, replied, Yes, we are ready. After a while, Nurse Zhang entered the room for the third time and said, "When your baby is born, the first person he will see is me, not you. So you must take this seriously. Are you ready? Have you brought any money?" It finally dawned on Mr. Chen that Nurse Zhang was asking for a bribe.
说你看，现在我们家没有亲人在这儿，老婆挺疼，我也走不开，也不能去，现在去国元机提现。你看你这儿啥规矩？你不管你啥规矩我都懂啊。这该给吧，你就是不要我们也会给啊。完了他就跟我解释啥规矩。麻醉师是多少？他说麻醉师要600，产科医生要600，我这儿你就看着给啊，这最低就是这样了。就是200拿不出手，你给200不如不给。在深圳你说给200就是侮辱别人。啊，我就200，正好我身上还有一个那个别人给我的请帖，因为你直接拿钱吧，好像有点侮辱人。我这请帖是红色的，我就撕了一个角，把请帖就捏在钱上。我说你看你先拿100啊，这100就是给产科医生，这个不是给你们的，这个叫定金。你不是不放心吗？你先拿着，我身上就这么多。当时就接过来揣口袋了。他说我没见过你这样的人，来这生孩子哪个像你？
Mr. Chen said that earlier he went to a nearby ATM to withdraw money, but when he saw the long line and was worried that his wife was about to give birth, he didn't wait in line. Later, he gave 100 RMB to Nurse Zhang and another 100 RMB to the obstetrician, but the obstetrician refused. He told Nurse Zhang that after his wife gave birth, he would withdraw more money and give her a red envelope containing 1,000 RMB. Mr. Chen knew the unspoken rule about giving red envelopes in the hospital, but the urgency of getting his wife to the hospital prevented him from withdrawing money beforehand. So he gave a red envelope to Nurse Zhang before his wife went into labor, fearing that without it, the hospital staff would neglect his wife and cause her to give birth in the ward. However, he never expected to find out later that night that his wife's anus had been sewn. As for the red envelope, Nurse Zhang had a different account. She said that she entered the room 4 times to urge Mrs. Chen to give birth, but Mrs. Chen was still eating. If Mrs. Chen had given birth in that room, it would have been Nurse Zhang's failure. Nurse Zhang claimed that it was Mr. Chen who kept assuring her, "Don't worry, I'm smart. I understand." She just smiled and said nothing, explaining that she treated every patient equally and wouldn't give special treatment based on such remarks. She admitted to receiving the red 100 RMB envelope, but insisted that it was given as a token of gratitude after the delivery, not as a request from her. She placed the money in Ms. Chen's bedside table before leaving her shift the next day. After a reminder from the hospital director, Mr. Chen found the 100 RMB red envelope in the cabinet. The accounts of where the procedure was performed, whether it was ligation or stitching, and the red envelope were all different. There were no records or videos to verify the events, only Mrs. Chen's hemorrhoids and the black thread. Because of this incident, Mr. Chen visited several hospitals. His wife was in excruciating pain. Both their parents were not in Shenzhen, and their newborn son developed pneumonia due to lack of proper care in a room at 19 degrees Celsius. The day after his birth, the baby was transferred to another hospital's neonatal intensive care unit. Mr. Chen said that on the 3rd day, Nurse Zhang approached him, expressed remorse, and even suggested that he slap her to vent his anger. She offered to pay for Mrs. Chen's hospital expenses as an apology, saying, "I know what's wrong with your wife's wound, and I can help relieve her pain." Mr. Chen replied, "All right, as long as my wife and baby are safe, I can let this go." Nurse Zhang then entered the room and performed some procedures on Mrs. Chen's anus, which relieved some of her pain. Mr. Chen felt more comfortable and left to visit his son in another hospital. On the way, however, he received a phone call from his wife saying that Nurse Zhang had entered the room again and forcibly removed the stitches from her anus while he was away. Mr. Chen rushed back to the hospital and confronted Nurse Zhang in the room.
回来给他堵在房间里了。我说你啥意思？你早上才跟我忏悔，你现在又在干啥？他说不是啊，什么这个9点钟位置、6点钟位置，这个病灶不给他除了，他不舒服啊，这么回事。
Mr. Chen was furious. "She apologized to me in the morning, And now she took advantage of my absence to forcibly remove the stitches, disregarding my wife's well-being. She tried to destroy the evidence. Nurse Zhang's account was different.
我就没缝针，我猜什么线，我真的搞不懂。在这个给他送痔疮这个过程，可能送的有点深了，送的深了这个过程，他屁股动动，这就疼的比较厉害，他就不依不饶了。哎呀，我这会儿就成了罪人了。
Mr. Chen no longer believed the explanations given by Phoenix Hospital and Nurse Zhang. Furious, he contacted the local media to tell his side of the story. The reporters wrote an article based on Mr. Chen's account without conducting any on-site investigation. The headline read, "Midwife Stitches, Mother's Anus for Insufficient Bribe." The next day, almost every local media outlet reprinted the story, and the incident quickly went viral nationwide. The online backlash was unanimous against Nurse Zhang. Unable to withstand the pressure, Shenzhen Phoenix Hospital immediately suspended Nurse Zhang for investigation. On July 28th, the Shenzhen Health and Family Planning Commission also got involved, inviting proctology experts from 3 hospitals to examine Mrs. Chen. At a press conference on July 29th, in front of many reporters, Nurse Zhang said,
做了个结扎，用4号丝线结扎的，没有动针，没有缝任何地方。
However, an hour later at the same press conference, a proctology expert stated that after the hemorrhoids started bleeding, the nurse performed a hemostatic suture. When asked if it was the type of suture that required a needle, the expert replied, "Of course, suturing requires a needle." Hearing the word suture shocked everyone in the room. The other 2 experts said they couldn't tell if it was a suture or a ligature because they only saw the ends of the thread. On the day of the press conference, which was also the 6th day after Chen's son was born, the Shenzhen Health and Family Planning Commission released the results of its investigation. They confirmed that the midwife had performed a hemorrhoid hemostasis procedure and had not sewn up Mrs. Chen's anus as Mr. Chen had claimed. They pointed out that Nurse Zhang's ligation of hemorrhoids was not problematic, but her acceptance of a bribe and performance of the procedure without proper authorization were improper and beyond the scope of her professional duties, which constituted a violation of regulations. Phoenix Hospital was punished according to the relevant regulations for the management of medical institutions. However, a curious detail emerged during the meeting. Reporters noticed that Mr. Chen, the whistleblower, was absent and unavailable by phone. This raised suspicions about whether he had misled the public. On July 31st, after being missing for 2 days, Mr. Chen finally appeared before the media. He claimed that Phoenix Hospital had restricted him, with 4 security guards stationed outside his wife's room and following him everywhere, even to the bathroom. He only learned that the reporters had visited him after he was released. Earlier, an elderly man who identified himself as Manager Yan visited him in the hospital. This man claimed to have been a military advisor for over 20 years, showed Mr. Chen his scars from the Vietnam War, and stated that he had connections in various military and legal systems. He then pleaded with Mr. Chen, saying that the hospital was facing a major crisis, and asked him not to escalate the matter. He also promised to help Mr. Chen in the future if needed. Mr. Chen rejected the commission's conclusion, telling reporters that his wife's anus had been sewn shut like a bag, preventing her from defecating until Nurse Zhang removed the stitches on the 25th. He also showed videos and photos that clearly showed needle marks and black thread embedded in the flesh. On August 2nd, the day Mr. Chen and his wife were discharged from the hospital, they went to the Huangbei police station at the Luohu in Shenzhen to report the incident. The police launched an investigation, suspecting Nurse Zhang of intentional injury. On August 12th, the police released the forensic report. The report indicated that the area around the patient's anus showed swollen, prolapsed hemorrhoid at the 9 o'clock position, with black thread stitches visible. The skin around the anus showed no signs of injury. This report, which was consistent with the opinions of proctology experts, confirmed that Nurse Zhang had lied. She had indeed used stitches, but she had not sewn up the anus. She had sewn up the prolapsed hemorrhoid to stop the bleeding. The police stated that Nurse Zhang did not sew up the patient's anus. Whether her treatment of the hemorrhoids was appropriate was not within the scope of the police. The report left Mr. Chen very disappointed because it contradicted his claims. He stated that his wife had developed severe depression and that he was waiting for an explanation from Nurse Zhang and the hospital and was considering legal action in the future. Unexpectedly, Nurse Zhang preemptively sued Mr. Chen and 2 media outlets for defamation, seeking 100,000 RMB, about $15,000, in damages. Angered by Nurse Zhang's lawsuit, Mr. Chen quickly hired a lawyer and countersued her for defamation, seeking only 1 RMB for emotional distress. In the first trial, Mr. Chen and his wife lost. The court reasoned that although Nurse Zhang had accepted a bribe of 100 RMB, Mr. Chen later found the same amount of money in the nightstand, which Nurse Zhang had returned. The allegation that Nurse Zhang sewed the anus out of revenge was considered to be Mr. Chen's speculation. The 2 media outlets had published the news based solely on Mr. Chen's allegations without verification. So the reports that the midwife was dissatisfied with the bribe and sewed the patient's anus were considered false. Whether Nurse Zhang sewed or tied off the hemorrhoid, she intended to stop the bleeding, not to sew up the patient's anus. Although her actions were unauthorized, they were intended to help the patient, as confirmed by expert testimony. Proctology experts and forensic analysis both concluded that Ms. Chen's anus was not sewn. Ultimately, the court ruled that Mr. Chen must publicly apologize to Nurse Zhang and pay her 30,000 RMB, about $4,400, in compensation for emotional distress. In light of the fact that the 2 media outlets had already corrected their reports and that Nurse Zhang had been under some pressure, she withdrew her charges against them. Mr. Chen appealed the decision, but due to insufficient evidence, his appeal was unsuccessful. He also sued the Shenzhen Health and Family Planning Commission, claiming that their assessment was inaccurate, but they withdrew the lawsuit in 2014, likely recognizing the lack of evidence and the potential waste of time, effort, and money. There were no winners in the sewn anus incident. Nurse Zhang lost her job and returned to her hometown in Shanxi to live with her unemployed sister. She later reportedly developed rectal cancer. Mrs. Chen suffered from severe depression, crying daily, and was unable to get over the incident. Her previously cheerful personality changed, and she often felt the urge to harm her son and had several thoughts of ending her life. Mr. Chen, burdened with caring for his wife and son and dealing with legal battles, lost his business. The family moved from a high-end apartment in Shenzhen to a cheaper place. Shenzhen Phoenix Hospital closed for a year to reorganize, and when it reopened, it suffered from a damaged reputation and dwindling patients. It finally closed permanently in 2018 due to urban planning changes. The journalist who reported the sewn anus story, without verifying the facts, Chai Hui-kun, was accused of fabricating the news after it was found to be false. As a result, the journalist disappeared from the media industry. This incident is a typical example of the strained doctor-patient relationship in Chinese society. The news went viral, and many netizens chose to believe Mr. Chen because it is common for patients to be asked for bribes by doctors or nurses, or to proactively give bribes out of fear that they will not receive proper care. In the case, a tragic car accident turned murder. Why did a talented piano student become a murderer? We mentioned that China does not have universal free health care. People with insurance still have to pay 30% or more of their medical expenses, while those without insurance pay the full amount. On the hospital side, it's undeniable that doctors and nurses work under intense pressure, but their salaries are not very high. This has led to a distorted doctor-patient relationship. It's said that non-surgical doctors earn extra income by overprescribing drugs to get kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies, while surgeons demand bribes from patients' families before surgery. It's also common for doctors to order numerous seemingly unrelated tests to increase their incentive payments. For example, someone with a sprained ankle might receive a CT scan, without the doctor even touching the injured area to make a diagnosis. The practice of doctors soliciting bribes from patients has been an open secret in China for 20 to 30 years. Regulatory failures in the medical system have allowed this phenomenon to worsen. It wasn't until 2014 that the National Health and Family Planning Commission issued a ban on bribes. With the advent of powerful smartphone recording and video capabilities, and the ease of exposing such practices online, the situation has improved somewhat. Many people believe that it's best to bribe the doctor before surgery to ensure that he or she pays more attention and provides better care. Some even say that giving a bribe can result in smaller incisions, shorter surgery times, and more anesthesia. If the surgery doesn't go well, the first thing the patient and family think is that they didn't give the doctor a bribe, or that the bribe wasn't big enough, because they don't fully understand the doctor's skill level, the difficulty of the surgery, or any complications. In 2023, according to the Guangzhou Daily, Zhanjiang Southwest Hospital introduced measures to reward medical staff for accepting bribes. The hospital explained that the system was designed to reassure patients and their families and make doctors and nurses more comfortable in their work. Their principle is, accept first, return later, which supposedly helps build harmonious doctor-patient relationships and reduces psychological stress for patients and their families. What a bizarre system, where paying for medical care in a hospital doesn't guarantee trust in the doctors and nurses. The patient's family feels compelled to bribe the medical staff just to feel safe, reflecting a complete lack of trust. On July 22, 2019, a pregnant woman died on the operating table during a cesarean section in a county in Sichuan province. Her family alleged that hospital staff demanded a bribe of 2,000 RMB, about $290, for each doctor during the surgery. When the family couldn't pay, they said, the doctors left the mother and baby to die on the table. Later, the official report stated that the woman died of amniotic fluid embolism and multiple organ failure, not medical negligence. The reason many people were willing to believe that a midwife would sew up a mother's anus out of dissatisfaction for a bribe, or that a maternity hospital would let a woman die on the operating table for the same reason, is that the practice of demanding bribes from medical personnel was rampant. Ordinary people despised the practice, but when it came to themselves or their families, they still offered bribes for peace of mind. The reporters knew that Mr. Chen's story would attract public attention. But logically, even if midwife and doctors were corrupt, they wouldn't be stupid enough to ruin their careers by taking revenge on patients. In reality, the quality of treatment depends not only on bribing the medical staff, but also on having connections and acquaintances in the hospital. With connections, one can be admitted to the hospital earlier, get a better room, be assigned to more experienced doctors, and receive better care. Not all medical staff behave this way, but it is an open secret in Chinese society. Although everyone involved in this incident suffered to varying degrees, this news story serves as a wake-up call about the medical system and the issue of bribery. In an interview, Nurse Zhang said she knew many ordinary people didn't believe her, but those in the medical industry understood her actions. If a similar incident happened in your country or region, how would the midwife, the hospital, the patient's family, and the media be treated? What do you think about this case? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more crime stories, please like and subscribe to my channel.